Okay, without further ado, we'll get started. First of all, the introduction. Here's the standard Austronesian tree, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Austronesian splits into several primary nodes, one of which is Malayo-Polynesian, which splits into West Malayo-Polynesian and Central East Malayo-Polynesian. It's generally accepted that the West Malayo-Polynesian node is not valid. Alexander Smith, in a 2017 paper, has proposed to replace it with about 8 primary subgroups. The languages that we're looking at are in the Central Malayo-Polynesian node, which is in turn part of Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. The purpose of this presentation will just accept that East Malayo-Polynesian is valid. That's a separate question. Central Malayo-Polynesian was first proposed by Blust in the 70s, and then his position was solidified in 1993, where he placed Central Malayo-Polynesian and East Malayo-Polynesian within a single node. It's been debated by then, it's been challenged, it's been defended in a number of papers by a number of scholars. The languages of Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian are in this area, extending out to the Pacific, including all the oceanic languages. In this presentation, we're focusing on the so-called Central Malayo-Polynesian languages, which excludes East Malayo-Polynesian, the South Halmahera West New Guinea languages. What we've been doing is investigating the history and relationship of these languages. We have a draft monograph of in excess of 350 pages with a mass of data from lots of languages, 180 tables of data showing reflexes, for instance. The purpose of this slide is to show that this is the data we're trying to provide a synopsis of in 20 minutes. It's simply impossible for us to present all the data in such a short period of time. So you'll have to forgive us if some details are lacking. This monograph investigates the history of these languages primarily on the basis of shared sound changes. That's the focus, but we also look at morphosyntax and lexicon where appropriate. We've identified 9 subgroups in this region, excluding Eastern Malayo-Polynesian, along with the internal structure of these subgroups. Here's a map of the subgroups we've identified. We're going to look at the evidence for these, working from west to east in the south and then west to east in the north. And we won't be looking at Schwing, South Halmahera West New Guinea, in much detail, although it is relevant at some points. First of all, Bima Lambata, the southwesterly most subgroup. The main evidence for this has been provided by Hannah Fricker in 2019. Who shows that B undergoes lenition in a subset of words. Emily Gasser has also provided support for this group on the basis of the lexicon. Here in this table, we see a number of Bima Lambata languages. They've all undergone lenition of B, normally to some kind of labial fricative. T is a Timor-Baba language outside this subgroup, and it does not have the same lenition. These kind of tables will recur throughout the presentation. The languages which are part of the subgroup under investigation will be at the top, separated by languages which are not by a double line. Timor-Baba, moving to the east. The main defining sound change of Timor-Baba is P to H, which then is often lost. This isn't a particularly unusual sound change, but in the context of this region, it is different to surrounding subgroups. Bima Lambata and Central Timor have P retained as P. Tanimbar Bomberai to the east has P undergoing lenition to F. Now, obviously, P to F with F to H would be a natural sequence of sound changes, and we'll discuss the possibility of linking Timor-Baba and Tanimbar Bomberai on this basis later in the presentation. The Central Timor subgroup contains a number of languages of Central Timor. The main defining sound change is denasalization of the velar nasal, engma to g, which then undergoes devoicing in some languages. And this doesn't occur, for instance, in neighboring Timor-Baba languages. The languages of Aru can be placed in a single subgroup. There are two main sound changes, a merger of J and capital R to capital R, as well as merger of Z, Y, and I before vowels to what was probably historically a glide. We're showing the second sound change here. East Kola retains the glide, which has undergone fortition in other languages. Tanimbar Bomberai. The Tanimbar Bomberai subgroup has been proposed in different configurations, and different components have been proposed by a number of scholars. There are two main defining sound changes, which is the merger of Z and D to D in most forms, which we show here, where Z undergoes the sound changes expected for D. So D to N is regular in Onin, Sekar, and Uruaninirin. Arguni, Bedowanas, and Araucanas have a split of Z to R and D, but the same split occurs with Proto-D. So we can propose that they merged. Interestingly, the one cognate set, which is irregular in the same way with Z to Y in possible reflexes. Another sound change is J to R in a lexically specific subset of words. There are a few wrinkles with potential R to L in some forms. The Arguni form, fis, is possibly a borrowing from languages in which that sound change is regular, such as South Halmahera, West New Guinea. Now, the importance of this sound change is that it provides evidence that Irarutu and Kuri, as well as Arguni, belong within the Timor-Baba subgroup. The position of these languages has been particularly unclear. Irarutu and Kuri in particular have been variously placed with South Halmahera, West New Guinea, or as isolates within Central Malayo-Polynesian. We find that they belong within Tanimbar Bomberai. They share the defining sound changes of Tanimbar Bomberai and can be placed in that subgroup. Okay, moving to the west and the north. Saluan Taliabu is a subgroup of Celebic, which contains many languages of Sulawesi. The languages of Taliabu Island have been previously placed within Central Malayo-Polynesian. We find that they're actually Celebic languages. They relate most closely to the Saluan Bangai languages, a subgroup which has been proposed by Mead, which is within Celebic. They share a number of changes, such as schwa to o and fusion of final vowel glide sequences with Saluan Bangai languages. And this not only links them, the Taliabu languages in boxes here, with Saluan Bangai, it also separates them from the other languages of Maluku, as shown here, such as Sanana of the neighboring island Mongolia, which undergoes deletion of final glides. They also have different phonology, morphology, and lexicon, which separates them from the languages of other languages of Maluku. Okay, so moving on to the east, Sulaburu. Main defining sound changes of Sulaburu is R to H and deletion of final glides, as well as a split of Proto-J. Sulaburu also has phonology, morphology, and lexicon, which sets them apart from other languages of Maluku, such as this innovative form for I. Here we show the sound changes of R to H and loss of J, which is different from these Ambon Seram languages, which have L. Moving on to Ambon Seram, the two main sound changes which define the subgroup are merger of Engma to N and N to N, and merger of voiced alveolars to Proto-L in most cases. There are a few wrinkles, but this is the usual outcome as shown in this table. Some languages have subsequent developments of L, such as L to R or L to N in South Nuaulu or L to Y in Tamilo. This is different to the Seram Laut languages to the east. It's not exactly clear what we would reconstruct for Proto-R, but it's unlikely to just be L. And similarly, J becomes a fricative in some Seram Laut languages. Seram Laut is probably the most problematic of our subgroups. It's been proposed by Collins in 1986, and Kowiai, language of Papua here, has been included by Walker and Eric Zorbel. It's distinguished from Ambon Seram to its west, as it has different reflexes of the relevant segments. It's also distinguished from Tanimbar Bomberai to its east, but it itself as a subgroup is weakly defined. Final glides is deleted, and schwa becomes in final syllables. While it is entire node is weakly defined, its three subnodes are well defined on the basis of phonology. Here is one sound change which does separate, which both defines Seram Laut and separates it from Ambon Seram, which is deletion of final W, where we have to reconstruct this W in Ambon Seram to account for these reflexes that showed fortition. What about some higher level links? Can we link any of the subgroups we've identified together at a higher level? Here are the subgroups we've identified, and we're going to look at how we can potentially link any of these together. First of all, what about phonological innovations? Nearly all languages in this region share loss of H, but there are possible traces of H in Alune and Ambon Seram language, as Collins shows that the reflexes of AHU are different to just AU. Even if this sound change was found in all languages, it's an extremely common sound change, so it would have very little subgrouping value. Another change shared by most languages is the uvular plosive, Q, becoming a glottal stop or being lost. But Watubela in Seram Laut has a different reflex with Q going to K. And even if this was found throughout all our languages, it's an extremely common sound change, so it would have little subgrouping value. Another sound change shared between a number of subgroups is lenition of P to a labial fricative in Seram Laut, Tanimbar Bomberai, and Aru, and it becomes H in Timor-Baba, which would be a development of F, which would be a logical development of F. However, this sound change is also found in South Halmahera, West New Guinea, so it looks like it's an aerial feature of these languages rather than being inherited from a node which includes these languages. There are also some complications as final P is retained unchanged in some Timor-Baba languages. Another change which could link these languages is change of the palatal nasal enya to N. Most languages have undergone enya to N, but it's retained in Bima Lambata, particularly in Havu and Da, which have enya retained as enya. Has different reflexes to N in Aru from the few potential reflexes we've identified. Timor-Baba, Seram Laut, Ambon Seram, and Sulaburu all have traces of a palatal with raising of adjacent vowels to palatal. So we could potentially link some languages on the basis of this, but it's tricky because it looks like it was retained until quite recently. And this is also quite a common sound change. We can also potentially link some languages on the basis of vowels. Tanimbar Bomberai and Seram Laut share a deletion of final W. They also share schwa to a in some final syllables. And Ambon Seram and Sulaburu share deletion of final Y. So to summarize the possible phonological innovations, P to F might define a Southeast Wallacea subgroup, but parallel development is likely, and there are some complications in Timor-Baba with retention of final P unchanged and different developments from up, and it's also in East Malayo-Polynesian. Probably the best case for a high-level link is with Seram Laut and Tanimbar Bomberai, which share P to F, enya to N, and schwa to A in final syllables. But none of these are exclusively shared sound changes. So the result is if we were to reconstruct a common parent of all these languages, it would be almost identical to Proto-Malayo-Polynesian. Maybe loss of H is the only difference. So we conclude there's very weak phonological evidence for higher level links. What about lexical evidence? First of all, here's a word meaning banana, which has which is cognate in a number of our subgroups, buku, and is also present in Papuan languages of Alopanta and the Bomberai Peninsula. Now, we're not proposing that these languages all form a single subgroup because they have this form. What this shows is that words can spread between subgroups by contact. We don't need to propose a common parent to account for buku. In fact, linking the Papuan languages to the Austronesian languages it would be quite tenuous. So with this in mind, let's look at some of the lexical evidence linking these languages. Proto-Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian Maya has been proposed, meaning tongue. This is present in most of our subgroups. Though it is only present, it's absent from Aru, and there are other forms meaning tongue, which are also quite common. The word malip for laugh is strongly present in the region, but within Bima Lambata, it is the Proto-Malayo-Polynesian form tawa is also retained. So malip would not be a replacement innovation. Words for marsupials have also been proposed as evidence for Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. Mansard has been proposed meaning bandicoot. The gloss throughout this region, except for one case, is couscous. This form is found in Munabutan languages. A number of Munabutan languages have manpe, meaning bear couscous, a specific kind of couscous found in Sulawesi. Now, we're not proposing that because this form is found in Southeast Sulawesi and these languages, that they all belong in a single subgroup. Instead, what this shows is that the word for couscous has spread by contact between different subgroups. There are also a number of Papuan languages which have forms which are quite similar to Mansard, or a reflex of it. Another word for marsupial is kandora, meaning couscous. We have a chain of phonologically similar forms stretching from West Papua to Halmahera out to Sulawesi. The proposed reconstruction kandora is only unambiguously and regularly reflected in one language of our target region. It's also one reflex in South Halmahera, West New Guinea. There are some other potential reflexes, dor, but these are ambiguous between a form such as kindor, which is more common with a different antepenultimate vowel. So to summarize, kandora meaning couscous, similar forms are found in Papuan languages. And it's regularly reflected in only one language outside of Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. Mansard is found outside Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. Maya for tongue may be valid, but it's one of several forms in the region. Malip for laugh is well attested in the region, but it's not a replacement because Bima Lambata retains tawa. And in any case, the word for banana, this mukul word in the south part of our region, shows that forms spread by contact throughout this region. So to summarize, there's very weak lexical evidence for Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. At best, we have 2 or 3 non-replacement innovations. To conclude, we've identified 10 primary subgroups in this region, including, if we include Eastern Malayo-Polynesian and Celebic, represented by Taliabu. We find no support for Central Malayo-Polynesian and Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian. And part of the reason that a lot of these languages are typologically very similar is doubtless due to extensive Papuan contact and substrate. So if we return to the tree at the beginning of our presentation, we're proposing to eliminate these nodes and replace them with the subgroups that we've identified. Thank you very much.